Meditation just allows us to kind of get a point of stillness within that flow of experience where we can see what's happening. We've got a series of three talks or presentations looking at what's traditionally known as the 3 levels of wisdom. So the first is understanding reality. Next week, Maitreya Bandhu will come and talk about breaking through into reality. And then on the third week, Surya Gupta will come and she will talk about becoming reality. So I'm going to start off this evening just by giving you a bit of an overview, but also talking about understanding reality. So the first thing that you might find when you're meditating is that as you meditate, it's not just your experience in meditation that you just feel more relaxed, but also your perception of the world changes. And from a Buddhist point of view, that's because our experience is mediated by our narratives about our experience. So we never experience anything completely directly. What we do is we experience reality through the sort of lens of our own perception and our own thoughts and our own narratives. So you might find as you're meditating, even from a body scan, even for, quite quickly, even if you are this was the first time you've ever meditated, you might find that what's happened is you become clearer. You might even come to meditation with some sort of problem or some sort of difficulty that you're churning over. And just by meditating, it sort of eases and you can see the full picture. So, and that's a mechanism of the mind, because what the mind is doing is that all the time, your experience there's a kind of veil of perception between you and reality itself. So your experience is going through a filter of your own perception. So in another way, we see what we want to see. We see our perception of the world is what we want our perception of the world to be. We have a kind of idea about what it is, and that's what we see. We see our idea about reality rather than reality itself. So the way that it's put in Buddhism is experiences are led by mind, produced by mind, preceded by mind. So our experience itself is led by our mind, it's led by our thoughts, it's led by our expectations and our narratives and our ideas about reality. So just to put that in an example, you might have seen that when you're in a really bad mood, which of course none of you are, maybe it's just me, but sometimes I'm in quite a bad mood. So maybe it's like I've had a sleepless night full of nightmares, or I'm annoyed with someone, and my perception of the world is somehow kind of jagged and full of sharp corners and aggressive and frightening, and I'm defended against it. I think I've spent whole periods of my life like that, where I felt defended against the world, and the world looks like a frightening place. It's an unpleasant place to be, and then everyone in the world is just slightly out to get me or quite annoying. The way our teacher put it is, he said, you kind of get this quantum of negativity, and it just looks for an object. So I can't sometimes call this the leech of blame, because leeches, they also, I can do this with my finger. The leeches, they stay on a kind of water source or waterfall or a river, and then they just wait for a heat source to come by. And oh, it was you know. And it's not really, it's just like some unfortunate person, probably your partner or your children, or your housemate. But the first person that you see, it's like, right, the leech of blame has hooked on. It was you who loaded the dishwasher like that, So your perception of the world is mediated by your mental states. And you might have had a real inclination of this, The other side of it is that if you're in an open and expansive mood, if you've just meditated, then your experience of the world is much softer and kinder, and more, in a funny kind of way, more loving. It's not out to get you, it's an opening. And I definitely experienced that, my experience of even the same places. I can tell my experience of the place is mediated by my mind, is mediated by my mood. So, instead of those things, you feel happy, you see much more beauty in the world, your mind is much more open to beauty. You see the beauty of a shaft of light in a shrine room or through a window. I had a lovely day today, and I was in the park with a good friend, and we were having such a delightful time, and we went to a cafe and we were sitting, and she went, I just feel like I've been on a real nature walk with you today, Vajratara. And I thought, well, it was Victoria Park in Bethnal Green, and I was thinking, well, I think you must have walked around Victoria Park hundreds of times, particularly as she had lockdown in Bethnal Green. And I've walked around it actually 4 times already today. But there was something about our conversation together and the openness of that just helped me see much more. Also, I find Brockwell, I hate to say I have got a preference of Brockwell Park over Victoria Park. I'm allowed to say that here, but I find it kind of quite flat. But there was we just kept on seeing, this little squirrel came up to us, and these 2-pied wagtails, they're such little jolly birds, their little tails going up and down, and then they scuttle off, and they've got such beautiful little yellow heads. Anyway, so we were delighting in the birds, we were delighting in the nature around us, and I don't think it's because the nature had changed in Victoria Park. I think it was actually to do with the fact that we were both enjoying each other's company so much that there was an openness there and a willingness to see the world. So, according to Buddhism, yes, our experiences are led by mind, produced by mind, preceded by mind. And if we take on truths about reality, it's a kind of combination of taking on things that are true about reality and seeing the world through that experience, and letting go of our old views, allowing those old views and old narratives, the old tired narratives, to drop. And if we can do that, then we'll have a substantially different experience of meditation and a substantially different experience of living in the world. So what Buddhism invites us to do is to take on certain sort of operational concepts. They're not particularly complicated. Well, you can make them very complicated. I've done a degree in Buddhist philosophy, and believe me, you can make them complicated, particularly when you introduce Sanskrit and Pali. But in a way, they're quite simple truths about the world, and then you test them out in your own experience and see if they make sense. It's said that a child of 5 can understand them, but a man of 80 would find them difficult to put into practice. So in a way they're quite simple truths, and you can test them out in your own experience and see whether you agree with them or whether you think they're true. And allow them to inform your meditation, so that you're letting go of the old ideas you have about yourself and allowing new ones in that are more in line with the way things are. So that's what I'm going to talk about this evening. And this is the first stage. The first stage is to listen, to take on these certain sort of very, very simple but very profound truths. It's a bit like you're adding a kind of drop of nectar into the crown of your head. And the second stage, which is breaking through into reality, is like that drop sinks through your central channel. So we had a little flavour of the central channel in meditation. But you allow those simple truths just to drop down and permeate into your being. You shouldn't take anyone's word for it. I said on Monday something that the Buddha said. He said, it's not my practice. Well, actually what happened is someone got a bit overexcited. I can imagine this. I feel really sympathetic with this person because I feel like I would have done this. And he threw himself down at the Buddha's feet and he said, "Free me from confusion." And the Buddha turned around and said, "It's not my practice to free anyone from confusion. When you yourself have understood the most valuable teachings, then you yourself will cross this ocean." So the first thing is you listen to, you take on a few simple truths and then you reflect on them in your experience. And on Monday we looked at this kind of process of intuition, reason and experience. So you feel them, you sort of take them on in the sense of seeing, well, how do I respond to that? Does that feel right to me? You know, before even the intellect, does it feel right to me? If it feels wrong, then it probably isn't the thing that you need. But if it feels right, to then reflect on it. If it's against your rational mind, then it probably is questionable as well. You're a rational being, so it has to make sense to you on a kind of rational level. And then you put it into practice in your experience and see whether it's true in your experience. So that's the second stage, is a reflection. And in meditation, it's not just, reflection isn't just about the intellect. The truths about reality should make sense to you because you are part of reality. If they don't kind of resonate in your being, then they're not really going to be representative of reality itself, because you are part of reality. So what you do is you turn these truths over with the mind of meditation. And the mind of meditation is sort of slightly different from the ordinary mind. The mind of meditation is a unity of mind and intellect and body. So the word here, just to, after I've said it's all very complicated, when you add in Pali and Sanskrit, I'm going to tell you a Sanskrit and Pali word, which is chitta. And chitta it's a heart mind. It's not just the intellect. It's not just emotions. It's a combination of kind of emotions, reflection, and the body as well. So you allow these truths to kind of permeate into that kind of deeper knowing sense of the body and the heart, and see if you really feel that these things are true. And we know it because we are it. You know, we know it. It's a bit like, are they true? So what the Buddha says true because the Buddha said it, or did the Buddha say it because it was true? Well, from a Buddhist perspective, it's very much the Buddha said it because it was true. So you have to find that out in your experience. You've got to find that kind of deep knowing, that deep descending of certain truths, turning it over into experience. And then if we can do that, we become it. So you reflect on certain truths about reality, and eventually it sinks down and you become it. And then it's not even a reflection. You live by certain truths about reality, which I'm going to go into in a minute. You live by it and you become it. And your being communicates from the reality itself. So there's a lovely series in the Zen tradition of the ox herding pictures, and they're called the ox herding pictures, and they're sort of symbolic of the spiritual journey. And the last one is walking through the marketplace with bliss bestowing hands. So in a way, when we reflect on reality, we become reality, we become these truths, and then our meditation isn't contained by just our bodies. It isn't even contained by our reflections. It moves outwards and radiates out to all beings. So, yeah, and you can think about this in terms of, like, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about the kind of great meditation masters where you can sort of feel their meditation, you know. You can feel them meditating in the room, and you can feel them as they walk down the street. You can feel that presence. And I've been in the presence of people like that. But then I thought, it's not just great meditation masters, because actually all the time our meditation is affecting each other. So you can feel like a few people were saying that they find it much easier to meditate with other people. And that's because our meditation is not confined to us. It actually affects the room. So we're picking up off of each other all the time. And and that happens, I've definitely seen it on retreat. It feels like it's not just my meditation, I'm carried with the meditation of other people. I've got a friend actually who was a particular crisis in her life, and she was on a bus, and she saw someone on this bus, and she went, I don't know what it is about him, but I want what he's got. And so she followed him off the bus. I'm not suggesting you do this, but anyway, she followed him off the bus, and she came up to me and she went, excuse me, I just want to say, what is it about you? If you met her, you'd think, I can totally imagine that she said that. Anyway, she said, what is it about you? And he said, look, I don't really know, but all I can say is that I go to the Buddhist centre and I meditate. And she was like, right. And then the same thing happened again. She's quite a character, actually, as you can imagine. And she was on probably some other form of public transport. And she saw someone and she thought, I don't know what it is, but that person has got something. So again, she went up to them and they said, what is it that you've got? And he said, well, I don't know, but I do go to the Buddhist centre in this was in Manchester, and I meditate. And she thought, hang on, this has happened before. I think it's a sign. And I like that, because I like to think that in a way we're all like that. If you meditate every day for 3 weeks, that is going to have an effect, and it's going to have an effect on your family and your colleagues and your friends and all the people around you. It might even have effects on strangers. It's quite easy I was thinking about this the other day, I was thinking it was quite easy to make people happy in some ways, not in a full sense, but in the sense of just a certain amount of kind of connection and friendliness. It's a real gift, actually. Anyway, I'm using that as an excuse because I'm turning into my mother and basically talking to everyone in the street, which I don't think it's a bad thing. Anyway, I told someone that she looked really beautiful. She was looking really beautiful in her Christmas party outfit. And I said, in the tube, I said, are you going to your Christmas party? And she said, oh yes. And I said, you look so wonderful. I just have to say you look so wonderful. And she was so delighted that when she went to the door, she kind of turned around and gave me a little kind of bow. I thought, oh, I'm so glad I said that. I didn't think that to myself. Anyway, it might have nothing to do with meditation. But so let's look at these operational concepts that you're going to reflect on and start talking to random people in the tube. So when we look at the sort of principles of reality, just to say how this works, how it works is you get great kind of masters in meditation. They have an experience that is beyond words and concepts. So understanding reality itself is an experience that's beyond language. But of course what happens is you're sort of sitting there like the Buddha or any other great meditation master. You see reality as it is directly and unmediated by concepts. And then you have to talk about it because you've got to pass that on to others. So you've got to reflect on reality unmediated by concepts and put it into language. And then other people can listen to that language, and then they can reflect on it, and then they'll have the similar experience. So it's a bit like any art form, say for example writing poetry. You have to have the experience directly itself, kind of beyond language, and then reflect on it, and then write it down or talk about it in a way that people can understand and reflect on themselves, and then they come to the same realization. And that's what the Buddha did. So when he had an experience beyond language itself, directly perceiving reality, he sat there for like 7 weeks just absorbing that experience. It says 7 weeks. Could have been longer, could have been shorter. But he just sat there in kind of bliss, just experiencing reality directly. And then he realised that he had to communicate that. So he had to reflect on it, and he had to say what he saw. But when you hear it, you've got to kind of see the implications of it. So what he said he saw, he said that everything arises in dependence upon conditions, and when those conditions cease, it ceases. So it's what we generally called conditioned arising. This being, that becomes. From the arising of this, that arises. This not being, that does not become. From the ceasing of this, that ceases. So it's quite simple. It's just basically everything arises in dependence upon conditions. But the implications of that are really quite enormous. It means that there's... so I'm going to talk about that in two sort of ways that are particularly relevant towards meditation. So one of the implications of that kind of overall truth is that nothing is fixed. So because everything is arising upon dependence upon conditions, conditions are always changing and everything is always changing. And the way that we notice that in meditation particularly is that we can see that our mental states are not fixed. So we tend to have, what we tend to do is we tend to make our experience ultimate. So any experience that we're having in the mind, we think that's it, that's final, that's the final experience. And we get stuck there. We think, we can't help in a way. This is the kind of veil of perception, this narrative that's an unhelpful narrative. We think, this is what I'm experiencing right now, that's it forever. So for example, in meditation this morning, I was starting to get quite preoccupied by a disharmony between two friends, and that I'd heard about the day before, and I find disharmony very, very upsetting. I just find that very distressing, because we focus so much on kind of love and connection. It's very distressing to hear about people's disharmony. And I realised halfway through the meditation I was very preoccupied with this disharmony. And I was thinking, oh, you just fixed it. You've just fixed that these two friends have fallen out. And you haven't allowed room for the fact that it can change. So what we do is we sit down in meditation, we have a contracted mind or a distracted mind, a mind of disharmony or difficulty. And we think, right, that's it. That's what the mind is. So I was just preoccupied with this disharmony. That's what was going to happen in my meditation. They were never going to become friends again. I was stuck with this disharmony in this sort of preoccupied mind. And then I thought about, well, what's the reality of the situation? I thought, well, the reality is everything changes, and it changes on dependence upon conditions. So if we allow a bit of love and awareness in there, things do change. So the first principle of meditation really is that awareness itself can change things. So that's why I asked you if your meditation had changed from the beginning to the end of the meditation. Even doing a body scan can change your experience. We heard about Pam, you go into the doctor's surgery, you realise you've forgotten your phone. You panic because it's like your connection to the outside world and life and everything in the universe. And but with a different set of conditions, when you reflect and you think, well, I'm just going to sit here in awareness. I can see I'm a bit agitated because I've left behind my phone. But I'm just going to sit here and connect with other people. Just be aware of myself sitting on this seat in this place. Your whole experience can change very, very quickly. So that's what meditation does. Just by being present to our experience, whatever our experience is, even agitation, it gives it a bit of kind of space to change and move, a space of absorption. And we can do that with each other as well, by listening to people, by being aware of other people. Even it doesn't matter if you say the kind of magic formula, but just a bit of listening and connection and communication can change things. Communication with ourselves, communication with other people. And I think we can trust in that just by using the condition of meditation. It's almost like, life is a kind of river and it's going really, really, really fast. And meditation just allows us to kind of get a point of stillness within that flow of experience where we can see what's happening. And if we do that, it does change our experience. It gives our experience space to change. I can remember being on one solitary retreat. I had a very unfortunate period. I've been meditating for a long, long time. And I started to get kind of emotional flashbacks in my experience, partly because I had a very, very traumatic birth. And I started to have the emotional experience of being born in a very, very difficult birth during meditation. And there wasn't much I could do about it directly. I sort of realised what was going on and allowed the space of awareness. And I thought all I could think was, this will pass. So I was having these kind of sort of emotional flashbacks. And I remember what I started to do. So I took up this practice. I know it sounds a bit odd. It was a bit intense just to sit in meditation and have that. So what I started to do was I started to develop an affection for having tea from a teapot with a little jug of milk, because that was in my little retreat situation. And there was something about, well, just being with the experience, just being aware of the experience, allowing the space to have the experience, the flow of experience will move on. And it did, actually. It did. It sort of arose and moved on. And I think at that point I really did get that sense of like awareness itself does change one's experience. In a way, that's the most kind of basic thing. You're not stuck in that experience forever. So whatever you're experiencing, it's not. You don't have to make it's not final. Yeah. And it's possible that with the conditions of meditation, particularly, we can go much, much further than we think we can. So even out of that experience, after sort of out of the intensity was over, I really did reflect. I thought, this is the human state of being. I'm not the only person who's had a traumatic birth. I'm not the only person who's experienced trauma in my life. There's other people who live these extraordinary sort of human experiences. And as I did that, I just felt this incredible love for other people as well, and for this human predicament of the sort of restless and passionate humanity that we are. So there's something about being with experience, allowing that space of awareness to allow experience to change, but also to move into a kind of greater unity. So I sort of started off with this very, very intense sort of difficulty of mind, and then that moved into a much greater love. And I think that process is possible all the time, and there's no limit to it. I think that's what I've learned from a long, long time of meditation. There's no limit to the potentiality of consciousness for a deepening awareness and a deepening of love. We're not fixed, and it's always possible to move into more expansive states. I really, really have seen that. I've never seen that not to be true. And that's what this symbol of the Buddha is about. You know, it's in a way we sort of, he lives on that shelf and sad satin cloths live in a squashed box. And, you know, he's got missing a finger, and anyway, it's like, there we go, we've got this image from Bali, Balinese Buddha. And it's easy to underestimate that, but what that really is a symbol of your enlightened consciousness. It's a symbol of your consciousness, the consciousness of humanity that's possible. And even there, it even doesn't end with the Buddha. You know, the Buddha's experience was an unfolding of creativity. So that's why we have a Buddha here, because he represents that limitless potential of consciousness. He's seated in meditation, he's very grounded and also energetic. and upright. He's calm and awake, with a loving expression. So we're not fixed, and there's no end to the potential of consciousness. And the second thing that the Buddha saw with all things arise in dependence upon conditions is that we're not alone. We tend to fix ourselves in one place, as we've seen. And when we fix ourselves in one place, in one state of consciousness, we also tend to fix other people. And when we fix ourselves and we fix other people, we become separate from them. We become isolated units, either in opposition or attraction to one another. It's like little kind of magnets rolling around the vast plane of existence. But we do that. We tend to imagine ourselves, and this is one of the kind of false narratives or false stories that we have about reality that's very painful to experience, where we're isolated and separate from each other. Lucky and I were talking today about a pandemic of loneliness. This belief in an isolated and separated selfhood between ourselves and others is extremely painful, and it's not true. It's not true. Because if we're not fixed, then neither is anyone else. And if none of us are fixed, we can condition each other all the time. And that's what we do. We condition each other all the time. We are each other's conditions. There isn't a fixed, isolated you and a fixed, isolated me. In a sense, we're mutual processes in life, affecting each other, always changing, always in a process of renewal, always in a process of becoming. And that's life. Life is just a process of becoming, and we are all part of that. And that's really what you see when you meditate. We're all part of this process of becoming. And it's not just that's not just an idea. It's also a deep resonance. When the Buddha was enlightened, he said he saw all beings like lotuses emerging from the mud of existence into the sunlight. And what's interesting about that experience is it said when he saw that, he shook. He literally shook with the resonance of all beings. So in the first half of this class, we looked at our own motivation to want to learn to meditate. And I know that if I talk to each one of you about your motivation to meditate, I would recognise that. I would recognise a human value in that. And that's because there are shared human values. There's a responsiveness to kindness. There's a responsiveness to openness. There's a responsiveness to beauty. I don't think anyone's got a truly weird, unrecognisable motivation to meditation. I just know that. I don't need to talk to it. I would actually quite like to talk to everyone and hear their motivation to meditation. But I've got a lot of confidence that there's nothing peculiar or unknown within that. Because we share something. We share something about being part of life, about being changing beings in the process of life. And there's shared human experience in all of that. And what the Buddha also said is, he said, if you see this way, if you see how profoundly connected we all are, then you're happy. Because what we want in order to be happy is not just, the latest thing, but we want connection. And that's actually how the advertising industry works, by the way, is they hook on your desire for connection by saying, well, you'll feel more connected if you buy this. But actually you don't necessarily feel more connected if you buy this. You feel more connected by actually realising you were never disconnected. By realising that connection is already here. So this is the sort of second operational concept, if you like, is just imagine if you lived life as if you didn't need to if you weren't alone, but that actually we were already all connected. And you live life by that. We are connected. So instead of grasping after connection, just open our eyes to the fact that we are all connected and that we're all living this kind of human existence together. There's a lot of peace in that, and there's a lot of connection in that, of here we are in life together, changing beings who respond to good conditions, beings who respond to love, beings who respond to a deepening of awareness, to listening to each other, to openness towards each other, to communication. That we're all beings who are in the same position together. It's almost like if you can assume that we're already connected, you can see what happens. And also in meditation, in the way one could see meditation as quite a solitary activity where we just turn inwards into our own mind. But actually, what we do when we turn into our own mind is that we see how much we're not alone and how much we're not isolated human beings. And that's why it's really helpful to meditate together, because you get that different experience of meditation and us all working together to kind of, in a way, uplift the consciousness of the room. And it does actually work, And if we see this way, we open our hearts to others. And, that does let in also a bit of sadness, because a lot of the time I think we close off from other people because we don't want to experience the sadness of the world. We don't want to experience unhappy states, so we close ourselves off and we defend ourselves from others. But it's also joyful, and it's joyful not because everyone's happy all the time, but because we're living out the kind of truth of reality, which is a truly human life where we are connected to others. It's a bit like I told this story on Monday, which I've been reflecting on since. Actually, I think there's quite a lot in there, where there's a prince and a ruler of a local kingdom, and he learns to meditate, and he goes into the forest to meditate. He becomes a monk, actually, a follower of the Buddha. And he's in the forest meditating, and he's just sitting there, and he's just, all the time, he just sits there saying, "Ah, bliss, ah, bliss." And the Buddha says, why is it true that you're going into the forest just sitting there saying, "Oh, bliss"? And he says, "Yeah, no, I am." And the Buddha said, "Why do you say, oh, bliss, oh, bliss?" And he says, "Well, because when I was a ruler, there were guards stationed at my door, and guards stationed on the palace, and guards stationed in the district. And I was always really anxious, and I was always afraid. And now I live with nothing, and I'm completely dependent upon the gifts of others, and I feel completely happy." And I think what I was reflecting on yesterday about that was that line, "And I'm dependent upon the gifts of others, and I feel completely happy." So he was someone who had nothing, really had nothing. Just a few old cloths that he was wearing. He was completely dependent upon other people, and he was completely happy. And then I thought, I can see sort of this sort of human predicament in that we isolate ourselves and we defend ourselves against others, and it's only when we let other people in and let ourselves be in human relationships that we're really happy. It's that defendedness just doesn't work. So even though probably he didn't get as nice a food, just to be honest, as he did in the palace, and he was dependent, when he says dependent on gifts of others, it would be like any old food that they're going to give him, and any old cloth that they're going to give him. There was something about being connected with others rather than defended, which actually gave him a happy, blissful life. So that's the kind of two operational concepts or implications of this great truth, this being that becomes from the arising of this that arises. So all things are dependent upon conditions, which means everything is changing all the time. Your experience isn't limited. Your experience isn't fixed. And we are connected. You know, we're not alone. We're connected with others. And to see this way is happiness. Is to see this way is to be joyful. So your homework for the next until Monday is to really reflect on that and just to see if you think that's true. And it's also to book on the weekend retreat. That's also homework.